In Pokemon, every type has a specific way that they like to play, where their traits lend themselves more towards this specific playstyle. In this video, I'm going to talk about the Ghost and the Dark type. I've already covered all of the other types, some in more detail than others, but I might go back and explain some of the earlier ones in more detail like I have these types. This video was brought to you by the members of the Crustacean Association, Aidan Tawney and Finnegan Cleary. Cool name, by the way, Finnegan. Thank you for your support there. The Ghost type always felt a little bit disconnected, as though it was kind of off to the side. I think this might have been because it was the only type with 2 immunities, and it's a type that doesn't really interact with many other types. It also has some really odd moves like Curse and Destiny Bond, and the Pokemon aren't that rare, so I think that scarcity, see what I did there? That's the kind of joke level you're going to get here, is something that made it feel a little bit different. The overall feel of the Ghost type is that it's awkward to deal with. This feels like the whole point of the Ghost type. In-game, it's often not a type that you have to deal with that often. Just look at in the first generation, where there was literally only one line of Ghost Pokemon, and they had this whole weird mechanic around you had to get a special item just to see them, and they had it was just weird, wasn't it? Like, they were meant to be different. Because the Ghost type was meant to be supernatural and uncommon, it doesn't really interact with that many other types. It only has a few weaknesses, and one of these is themselves. Now, Ghost type moves are mostly found in Ghost and Psychic types, which are 2 types that are weak to Ghost. So it makes hitting a Ghost type with Ghost moves very unviable. And I know I just said Ghost a lot, so let me try and put that into a way that makes more sense. Ghosts are weak to Ghost, but the main users of Ghost type moves are Ghost types and Psychic types, who are also weak to Ghosts, who therefore make it so that taking out Ghosts with Ghost types isn't really that good of a strategy. I think that's what I'm trying to say. This means that Dark type is the only consistent way of dealing with Ghost types, so you can very easily keep them out of danger. This didn't used to be the case with Pursuit, which really punished you for keeping a Ghost type in, because then obviously they would be absolutely destroyed by Pursuit. Talking about that actually, do you wish that Pursuit came back? Because I kind of do. It would hold a lot of Ghost types in check. However, it would also significantly weaken some Psychic types, so maybe not. And also you got the fact that Dark is no longer resisted by Steel, which would mean that it would become a much more effective move, and Dark doesn't really need the benefits, as we're going to talk about later, so maybe not. Actually, I've just talked myself out of that. Whilst Ghost is difficult to get rid of, it also has a pretty good defensive profile that helps it to be a very good pivot. Resistance to U-turn and double immunities, including a close combat immunity, means that you can get onto the field quite a lot, allowing them and their team to keep up momentum. I think this is why Ghost is a very good secondary type. Its lack of interactions means that it doesn't really amplify many weaknesses of many Pokemon, but it does provide them with great additional defenses. Immunities just overriding any other weaknesses does that a lot. Combine Ghost with a decent typing like Dragon or Steel and you get amazing Pokemon like Dragapult or Goldango. Or combine it with normal and you get one of the best synergies in all of Pokemon in Hisui and Zoroark. These are all Pokemon who gain so much defensively from their Ghost typing. And that's not even talking about the utility that this provides, like not being able to be trapped or spin blocking, which Ghosts also have cornered the market on. Ghost's main issue is the prevalence of knockoff and how good and powerful a move that is. I'm going to talk about it later when I talk about Dark types, but knockoff is one of the best moves in the game. Most Ghost types will get completely destroyed by a knockoff, as the Pokemon themselves aren't the most bulkiest in the world, so one of the key things they will have to think about defensively is how to avoid being in situations where they can be hit by this move, which is obviously very difficult considering how prevalent the move is nowadays. Offensively, the Ghost type doesn't wow on the type chart. It's not the best, but it's also not the worst. Hitting Psychic is okay, but there are much better types and more common coverage types like Bug and Dark that you would be more likely to hit them with. I've already talked about how Ghost's relationship with itself is complicated, but the main thing I would say with Ghost is that it is a very spammable type. Normal is relatively uncommon at top level singles. You have Pokemon like Blissey or Ursaluna, but at the time of recording there actually isn't a normal type in Overused. This means that you only really have to deal with the Dark type or Garganacl, and Dark types are typically more offensively minded. The only defensive Dark type I can think of at the moment is Tinglu. Obviously by far the best Ghost type spammable move is Shadow Ball. Shadow Ball is a brilliant move, which does some amazing damage and has that amazing 20% chance to lower your special defense, meaning it will just do more damage. You can use the move as much as you want, and it's part of what makes many Ghost type attackers so deadly. I will say, however, that other than Shadow Ball, Ghost's move selection is very, very limited. I like to think of attacking moves being divided into 3 different categories: utility moves, main moves, and power moves. Utility moves are moves that typically have a lower power, around the 40 to 75 range, but offer you something else rather than just damage. This could be something like priority, or maybe having a really good secondary effect. Main moves are your bread and butter. They're often your main stab option and can fall between 80 to 100 base power. They're the moves that you would click most often, and they're a lot less situational. Power moves are the moves that deal a lot of damage, but have some sort of drawback that mean that you have to think about when you're going to use them. Ghost to me lacks a lot of these moves, with only around 4 viable stab moves for the average Pokemon. Shadow Ball, as I mentioned, is brilliant, but Hex is a great utility move that combines well with Will-O-Wisp. If you're running a team that is based around status, then Hex essentially just becomes a main move as well. But on the physical side, they really only have a utility move and a power move: Shadow Sneak and Poltergeist. Shadow Sneak is obviously pretty situational, and you don't want to run it as your main stab just because of how weak it is. And whilst Poltergeist is a very good move, it doesn't pair well in a metagame where Knockoff is one of the best moves. I'm not saying it's bad, it's not the move you would want to have as your main stab option. This means that physical attackers generally struggle with a consistent move, whereas special attackers struggle with those extra powerful moves. There are some signature moves, but I'm not really talking about those here, I'm more talking about the type in general. I think you can see this the most in Dragapult, a Pokemon who really wants a physical, consistent move, but doesn't have one. It doesn't need Shadow Sneak because of its incredible speed, so it instead has to use Shadow Ball, but it really needs a much more powerful special move because it has a weaker special attack. Overall, I would say that Ghost is an incredibly good type, which has some really, really good benefits towards it. Its main issue is the Dark type weakness and an incomplete move variety section. Ghost types work best when they are paired with other types, as they pretty much always complement them. One of the types that they complement the best with is the Dark type. Dark is kind of weird, as it's a good type, but it's also a type that has one specific move which is so prevalent. Normally when I've covered types like this, like Rock or Bug, having a good move means that the rest of the type kind of gets held back a little bit, especially when that move is so widely distributed. But for the Dark type, this isn't really the case. Knockoff is unbelievable as a move. It has levels of value that are unheard of in Pokemon. First of all, there is no way to get around Knockoff. Knockoff will hit every single Pokemon, and there's no real downside to hitting it unless maybe you're hitting a Rocky Helmet or some Pokemon that deals with contact moves. Second of all, Knockoff has some great power behind it. When I talked about the move categories before, Knockoff feels like it should have the power of a utility move, and it does sometimes, but the rest of the time it has the power of a really strong main move, which makes it a great option for just dealing damage. Finally, Knockoff gives amazing utility. Items are so important to Pokemon that getting rid of them is amazing, and the fact that Knockoff can do it while dealing so much damage, while being practically unblockable, is phenomenal. It is one of the best moves in the game. To me, it's probably the best move in the game. Knockoff being so good makes it both an amazing coverage option and an amazing stab option. So many good Dark types are good because they can fire out that super powerful Knockoff. Just look at my favorite Pokemon, Crawdon. In cases like this where you have such a good move, what Game Freak has traditionally done is given that to a weaker type. Look at both Stealth Rocks and U-Turn. They were both given to bad types, but they are very, very good moves. Game Freak decided not to do this with Knockoff. It's definitely the best part of the type, but unlike Bug or Rock, who lack redeeming qualities other than their signature moves, the Dark type doesn't struggle. It's got such a good general profile to it that it makes Knockoff so much better. Dark also has access to one of the best priority moves in all of Pokemon, Sucker Punch, which has the power of a regular main move, but with the utility of a, well, utility move. Part of what makes Sucker Punch so good is the fact that it causes mind games. It makes your opponent have to change how they are playing just because they think you might have a move. I personally love Sucker Punch. It's such a good and well-designed move that rewards smart play, and it feels a lot like a move designed for competitive. It doesn't feel as though it would be that good a move in-game, or at least it wouldn't be that relevant in-game, whereas in competitive, it feels much more relevant. If physical Dark types didn't have enough good options for Stab, they also have access to Crunch, which is a far more consistent version of Knockoff. It will always deal a similar amount of damage and isn't as much as a burst damage as Knock is. Again, I'm going to go back to Crawdon. Crawdon often runs both Crunch and Knockoff because it prefers that spammable damage that Crunch can provide. Looking at it from a type chart perspective, the Dark type really does one specific job extremely well, and that's that it is an amazing counter to the Psychic type. They are immune to Psychic type attacks, hit them for super effective, and even have a way to punish quicker Psychic types through Sucker Punch. This is one of the key roles of the Dark type, to keep Psychic types in check, because without them, they would be really hard to counter. This was the thing that the Dark type was created for all the way back in Generation 2 after all. It does have a few things that it does have to worry about when dealing with Psychic types. A lot of them carry Fairy or Fighting coverage, which can be used to counter the Dark type, but also they can't use those moves if a Sucker Punch gets them first. I also talked about it earlier, so I'm not going to cover it that much now, but Dark also is one of the best ways of countering the Ghost type, so they're very important to have on a team. But being weak to Fairy, Bug, and Fighting, some of the most common attacking types in the game, really isn't that good for the type. I don't think that this is that much of an issue, however, as most Dark types are offensively minded Pokemon and really care about how much damage they're dealing rather than how much damage they are taking. I talked a lot about how good the physical moves are in Dark, but I think similar to Ghost, it is a bit lacking in move variety, especially on the special side. Snarl and Dark Pulse are the only two widely available Dark type special moves, and while they are good, they could definitely do with a few more move archetypes. Dark Pulse fulfills the role of good general stab in the Dark type, whereas Snarl is much more that utility option. They are definitely lacking that powerful move. A lot of Dark types would appreciate it a lot more if they had a really powerful Dark type nuke available to them. I'm thinking of Pokemon like Hydreigon or Houndoom. Also, side note, did you know Cacturne has 115 special attack? And that its special and physical stats are mirrored? Like, it feels though it should be way more of a physical attacker. I just wasn't expecting it to have that high of a special attack. I personally don't think that every type should have every single one of these moves, but the fact is, Dark definitely lacks one. I will also say here that Galarian Moltres does just have a better version of Dark Pulse as well. I wouldn't advocate for expanding that move out, because then it would just invalidate Dark Pulse, but it just feels weird that they made two moves which are pretty similar. There's also a few kind of weird specific things with the Dark type that they have available to them. There's obviously the move Taunt, but I wouldn't say that this is a Dark type specific thing. You know, it's not a thing that only Dark types can learn. If you watch my video about Dragon and Fairy types, I talked about how Fairy types make really good use of Calm Mind, and how status moves don't necessarily have to be beneficial for their type. Just because they're status moves, you don't get Stab on them, with a few exceptions. I mainly just brought up the whole thing with Taunt because I knew if I didn't, somebody would mention it. Something that people are also going to mention is their immunity to Prankster, which I always think of as being really weird. Like, they just have this immunity to a specific ability. Obviously, Prankster is a good ability, but it's so weird that they decided, you know what, it just gets immunity to this one specific ability that a few Pokemon have. But it's just really weird. I don't know why Pokemon did that. I get why they did it, but we should get more ability-specific immunities, like types that just say, you know what, Vital Spirit. I ignore Vital Spirit when I'm on the field. I don't even know how that would work. But anyway, I wanted to bring up Prankster because I know that somebody's going to be like, oh, well, you didn't mention Prankster. And that's because Prankster, and therefore the Prankster utility that you get with Dark, are more relevant in doubles. I'm not talking about doubles in this video. I'm more talking about singles. I prefer it more as a format. It's just, I don't really like the fast pace of doubles. But I know a lot of people do like to comment about it. So here it goes. Here's the thing about doubles. Overall, I would say that the Dark type is a very good type, and it plays a really important role on teams as the counter to the Psychic type. Similar to Bug and Rock, it is also a type that has a very widely accessible move, which is by far the best trait of the type. But unlike Bug or Rock, it has other things going for it, so the Pokemon are actually quite good on their own. Dark types make to be really powerful physical attackers, and they also provide you with a little bit of defensive utility, especially against countering those ghosts or those psychic types, or Prankster. Again, if you're in doubles, Prankster mentioned, Incineroar mentioned here. You guys love Incineroar. But yeah, both the types we talked about today, very good. If you have enjoyed this video, please consider leaving a like or a subscribe. It would be very helpful, but thank you.